laughter reached Ari before the front door even settled in the frame. It wasn't the warm sound that belonged in a married home. It was loose, careless laughter, like people who believed no one was listening. Ari James stood in her own entryway, with her carry-on still in her hand. She'd cut her business conference short and flown back to Washington, D.C., because something in her chest had felt wrong for days. Not fear, not jealousy, just an inner alarm she'd learned to respect. The house smelled like red wine and expensive perfume. Not her perfume, someone else's. Ari did not announce herself. She did not let the door click all the way shut. She held it half-latched and listened. The sound came from the living room. Marquis had insisted on the sliding pocket door because it looked high-end. The door was mostly closed, but not all the way. Through the thin gap, Ari could see the edge of the cream sofa and Marquis' shoe on the coffee table, casual and entitled, Marquis James. He was stretched out like the couch belonged to him alone, one arm over the backrest, the other holding one of their wedding crystal glasses. The glass caught the lamplight and threw it in small, sharp flashes across the room. A woman sat close beside him, her legs draped across his lap. She laughed again, then tapped the rim of her glass with a manicured fingernail. Ari knew the woman's face before her mind wanted to admit it. Jada Monroe. Ari had seen her at BlueLedger's holiday reception, smiling, listening, watching. Now those eyes were aimed at Marquis, and Marquis was looking back like he'd won something. Ari's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. She made herself loosen her grip. Panic was loud. Precision was quiet. Marquis leaned forward and poured more wine, as confident as if he were hosting guests. Once she signs the divorce papers, he said, everything gets simple. Jada's laugh softened. You're sure she'll sign? Marquis didn't hesitate. Ari hates scenes. She'll do anything to keep it clean, especially at work. Work. That word landed in Ari's body like a fist. He wasn't talking about heartbreak. He was talking about pressure, reputation, timing. Jada swirled her wine. She still thinks BlueLedger's worth is whatever you tell her. Marquis smiled. That's the best part. She has no idea what the real number is. Ari's mouth went dry. BlueLedger was her life's work. Marquis had been there for the speeches and photos. Ari had been there for the code, the contracts, the architecture that made the whole thing run. Jada lifted her glass. Poor Ari. She probably thinks she's set for life. She will be, Marquis said gently, and the gentleness made it worse. Set, right where I put her. Ari felt her heartbeat slow. Not calmer, just harder. The moment you stop expecting mercy is the moment you start thinking clearly. Marquis took a sip. I've been moving assets for months. Tiny amounts, quiet transfers, nothing dramatic. Jada leaned in. And she didn't notice? Marquis waved his hand like the question was cute. She signs what I put in front of her. New operating agreements, loan documents, vendor approvals. She thinks I'm handling the boring parts. Ari stared through the gap at his face. She remembered that same face at their wedding. Eyes shining, voice steady, promising loyalty. It was unsettling to realize he could wear devotion the way he wore a suit. Marquis lowered his voice, savoring the confession. She has no idea she signed away her stake. Jada let out a low whistle. That's cold. That's business. Marquis corrected, as if the words made it clean. Ari's mind grabbed the phrases and lined them up like evidence on a table. Operating agreements, loans, stake, transfers. Not a messy affair. A structured theft. Jada's heel tapped against Marquis' thigh, slow and confident. When do you tell her about me? Marcus laughed, short and sharp. After Vegas next week. The trip keeps her distracted. Then our attorney serves her papers at BlueLedger. Maximum embarrassment. She'll sign just to stop people from watching. Jada's laughter fluttered. You're terrible. Marquis' smile widened. I'm efficient. Jada leaned in and kissed his neck like she was claiming territory. She'll cry. She always cries when she's overwhelmed, Marcus said, like he was discussing the weather. She'll beg me to work it out. That's when I tell her about you, about us. Jada tilted her head. And the baby? Ari's lungs stalled for one cold second. Marquis' tone turned almost playful. That too. She'll be so broken she won't even read the settlement. Ari didn't feel tears. She felt a quiet, clinical disgust, a sense of the floor shifting under everything she'd believed, and the strange clarity that came with it. Weak, he'd called her, without needing the word. She's trusting, she's soft, she's easy. Ari didn't rush in and give Marquis what he expected, a wife on the edge, begging for answers. She didn't give Jada the satisfaction of a scene. Ari eased her suitcase upright without letting the wheels click on the hardwood. She backed away from the door, slow and precise, leaving nothing behind that could be traced. Outside, the cold air hit her face and helped. It reminded her the world was still steady. It reminded her she still had control over at least one thing, her next decision. She walked down the steps, put the suitcase in the trunk, and slid into the driver's seat. Her hands did not shake. She drove 3 blocks before she allowed the truth to settle fully. Marquis wasn't just cheating. He was planning to dismantle her life in public, then tell himself it was her fault for being naive. He was going to take BlueLedger, take her name, take her future, then leave her standing in front of her employees with papers in her hand and no time to think. He thought she was quiet because she was weak. He thought her trust meant she was stupid. He thought embarrassment would do what theft could not. He had made one mistake. He had said it all out loud. Traffic lights washed her windshield red, then green. She passed a row of brick row houses where warm windows glowed, families eating dinner like the world wasn't collapsing inside her ribs. Her phone vibrated, Marquis' name, already calling, already checking the driveway. Ari let it ring out. She pictured him pausing mid-laugh, hearing only voicemail, and feeling the first prick of worry. She didn't enjoy that image. She just recorded it. For one controlled breath, grief rose in her throat, hot and useless. Then she swallowed it down. Grief could wait. Monday was coming, and Monday required math, and she would not let him touch her future. Ari pulled into a hotel garage near the wharf, a place anonymous enough that no one would look twice at a woman with a suitcase. She sat in the car for a moment, watching her own face in the rearview mirror. She looked composed, almost calm. Inside, something had turned. Purpose. She opened her phone and tapped a contact she hadn't needed in months. Attorney Nia Caldwell. Nia answered on the second ring, voice low and clear. Ari? Ari kept her voice flat. I need you to prepare an emergency asset freeze order. Silence, then a slow breath. Tell me what happened. I will, Ari said. Later. Right now I need everything ready by Monday morning. Every document, every filing, no gaps. Nia didn't ask for emotion. She asked for structure. Do you have proof? Ari stared at the concrete wall and imagined Marquis laughing in her living room. I have enough, she said, and I know exactly where to find the rest. Nia's tone sharpened. Once we start, there's no going back. Ari thought of crystal glasses used like trophies, of vows spoken like theater. There's nothing to go back to, she replied. She ended the call and stepped out into the cold, damp air. Somewhere above, a siren slid through the city like a warning. Ari rolled her suitcase toward the elevator and kept her face blank, because she understood a truth most people learn too late. The moment you let them see you break is the moment they believe they've already won. And if you're still here with me, don't go anywhere. The next part is where the quiet turns into consequence. If you want to see how a silent CEO revenge plan really starts, give this video a like, and drop a comment telling me what time it is for you and where you're listening from. Ari didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the kind of sleeplessness that makes you helpless. It was the kind that turns every memory into a file you can sort, label, and open when you're ready. In the hotel room near the wharf, she sat on the edge of the bed in the same clothes she'd flown home in, shoes lined neatly by the door as if order could anchor her. The city outside hummed. DC never truly went quiet. Ari watched a passing headlight sweep across the ceiling and thought, with a calm that surprised her, tomorrow will arrive. Just not the one Marquis planned. She opened her laptop, not to work, but to remember. BlueLedger systems had started 5 years earlier in a 4th-floor apartment in Navy Yard, where Ari had balanced a folding desk against the wall so it wouldn't wobble when she typed. At 28, fresh out of a master's program in computer science, she was tired of watching companies treat their data like a junk drawer, stuffed, unsorted, vulnerable. She wanted clean systems, transparent logs, security that didn't rely on luck. She wrote the first version of BlueLedger in 90 days. Not the polished product they sold now, but the backbone. Tamper-resistant records, audit trails that couldn't be erased without leaving scars. She coded until her wrists burned. When she took breaks, she stood on the balcony and stared at the river, telling herself she could either be exhausted in a cubicle or exhausted building something that belonged to her. Marquis had been there during that season, smiling like he understood the vision. They met at a networking event downtown. Bad coffee, eager handshakes. Ari went because a professor insisted she needed people as much as she needed code. Marquis walked up like he'd been invited by the universe itself. Handsome, tailored suit, easy with names, quick with compliments, that sounded specific enough to feel real. "You're Ari James," he said, like he already knew her. "The one who asked the panel about zero-trust architecture." Ari blinked. That was one question. "It was the only question that mattered," Marcus replied, and despite herself, she laughed. He worked in operations for a contractor, the kind of job that taught him how to talk to clients without flinching. He said he admired builders. He said he wanted a life that wasn't just meetings and spreadsheets. And when Ari described her idea, software that made compliance simpler and data safer, Marquis didn't look bored. He leaned in. He asked how she'd sell it. He asked who would buy first. He asked what could break it. In the beginning, those questions felt like partnership. When Ari quit her stable job to focus on BlueLedger full-time, Marcus celebrated with takeout and cheap champagne. He helped her rehearse pitches, pretending to be skeptical investors. He brought her names, contacts at firms that needed better data security, friends of friends who could at least take a meeting. He loved walking into rooms where nobody knew him and leaving with someone's card in his pocket. The company grew fast. A small seed round, then a bigger one. 10 employees, then 20, then 40. Ari stayed close to the product. She wrote code beside junior developers. She reviewed architecture documents at midnight. She loved the clean logic of systems more than the messy theater of leadership. Marquis slid naturally into the theater. He became COO with a title that looked good on a slide deck. He handled vendors, hiring, the day-to-day friction Ari had no patience for. He took meetings. He smiled for photos in front of the company logo. Investors liked him. Clients trusted him. Charm in those rooms passed for competence. Ari told herself it was balance. Brain and face. Builder and bridge. They married in a small ceremony near Capitol Hill. Marquis said the vows like he meant them. Ari kept her last name professionally, but legally she added his, a hyphen she barely used. Marquis said it made them look united. Ari believed him. What she didn't do, what she never did, was hand him the keys to what mattered most. Ari had watched her mother's closest partner take over a company after a sudden death, not by force, but by paperwork. People spoke softly about stability, while assets moved like water into new hands. Ari learned then that love and trust were not legal strategies. So when BlueLedger needed serious capital to scale, Ari used money she'd inherited from her grandmother. Enough to fund stability, enough to keep her from being cornered by anyone who wanted control. And she funded it through a holding company. Obsidian Bridge Holdings. The name sounded like an investor that preferred silence. Obsidian Bridge owned the majority share, and the ownership trail was layered through filings and proxies that looked boring enough to discourage curiosity. Only two people knew the truth, Ari and attorney Nia Caldwell, who built the structure with the careful patience of someone who understood how predators thought. She'd met Nia years earlier in a courthouse hallway when a landlord tried to bully Ari out of a lease. Nia had spoken softly, then filed one motion that ended the noise. No theatrics, just precision. That was why Ari kept her close. Nia didn't promise comfort. She promised clean edges, sealed doors, and consequences that arrived on time, when it mattered most, always. When Marquis asked about Obsidian Bridge, Ari told him it was a quiet investor who didn't want attention. Marquis accepted that answer because it benefited him to accept it. In his mind, an absent owner was as good as no owner at all. For a while, life looked normal, busy, successful, bright in the ways people admire from a distance. Then, 18 months ago, Ari noticed a missing client payment. It wasn't dramatic, just a discrepancy between what the invoice stated and what the main account reflected. She found the deposit, but it had landed in a separate account with a name she didn't recognize, routed through an intermediary that shouldn't have been involved. When she asked Marquis casually, he didn't panic. He smiled. "Accounting's cleaning up some routing," he said. "You know how banks get when we onboard new vendors?" He said it with the same calm he used on clients, and Ari wanted to believe him. But the back of her mind, the place that had learned to distrust comfort, stayed awake. Ari didn't confront him. She didn't accuse. She didn't even mention it again. Instead, she built a mirror. Inside BlueLedger's own platform, Ari wrote a quiet, internal tool that duplicated transaction logs in real time and stored them in a place only she could access. Not a hack, not an illegal backdoor, just an audit feature she had every right to maintain as the company's principal architect. The mirror watched without blinking. It recorded transfers, approvals, vendor additions, login times, and the digital fingerprints people left behind when they believed they were alone. At first, the discrepancies were small, a few thousand here, a vendor paid twice there. Then the pattern widened. Vendor names that appeared and vanished, bonuses approved for employees Ari had never met. Client entertainment that landed at a luxury resort, approval stamped in the middle of the night from Marquis' login. Ari felt the same cold sensation each time, not panic, but recognition. Someone was learning how far they could go. She kept working. She kept smiling. She kept letting Marquis say our company at dinners, soaking up admiration like it was medicine. She watched the way he asked questions about her calendar, not from affection, but from logistics. She started moving her own pieces quietly, copies of key documents, updated passwords, a storage unit leased under her maiden name, a second phone kept off unless she needed it. Preparation didn't require drama. It required discipline, and still she didn't pull the trigger. Because the hardest thing about betrayal isn't the proof. It's the moment you accept that proof changes who someone is. Now in the hotel room, Ari closed her laptop and stared at her reflection in the dark window. She looked like herself. Steady eyes, neat hair, a woman who could walk into a boardroom and not apologize for taking up space. She thought of Marquis on the sofa, sipping wine like a king, promising humiliation as if it were a gift. Ari's phone buzzed again, but she didn't reach for it. She let the sound fade into the room like distant thunder. On Monday, Marquis would want a scene. Ari was going to give him something colder than a scene. She was going to give him paperwork. Ari learned something about crisis long before she became a CEO. It doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It arrives like a draft under a door, a small temperature change that makes the hair on your arms lift before your mind has words for it. By the time the hotel room clock blinked past midnight, she had stopped trying to pretend this was a marriage problem. Marquis had made it a business problem. He'd spoken about divorce like a lever, about humiliation like a tactic, about her company like a prize he'd already wrapped and tagged with his name. And Ari did not lose prizes. She didn't throw them across the room. She didn't cry over them in front of strangers. She secured them, inspected the locks, and replaced any hinge that looked weak. She took a shower that was more about waking her nerves than washing her skin, then sat at the small desk by the window with her laptop open and her phone face down beside it. Outside, the Potomac moved like black glass. The wharf lights gleamed on the water and made the city look calm, innocent even. Ari knew better. DC was a place where people smiled while they signed documents that ended careers. She opened a folder labeled Mirror. It held 18 months of quiet watching, pages and pages of data that would be unreadable to anyone who didn't know how the system breathed. Ari knew. She had written the lungs. The first thing she did was check for damage. Not financial damage. Not yet. She checked for contamination, access logs, new admin privileges, unusual device sign-ins. If Marquis realized she was onto him, he'd go for the evidence. He'd wipe drives, destroy paper trails, charm someone into accidentally losing files. But the mirror was still intact. The log copies were still syncing. The quiet vault still held. Ari exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the window for a second. She watched the fog disappear. Then she started making calls. Attorney Nia Caldwell picked up on the first ring, as if she'd been awake and waiting. Nia never sounded rushed. Her voice always carried the same temperature, cool enough to cut through emotion, but not cruel. "Ari," she said, "tell me what you heard." Ari repeated the words like she was reading them back for a record. He said once I sign the divorce papers, everything gets simple. He said I have no idea what BlueLedger's real value is. He said I signed operating agreements and loan documents that moved my stake. He said he'll have you, our attorney, serve papers at work for maximum embarrassment. There was a pause, a quiet scratch of a pen. And Jada Monroe was there? Yes. And he mentioned Vegas next week? Yes. Nia's breath left the line like a slow release. All right, here's what we do first. We lock down the personal and corporate accounts, emergency asset freeze order, temporary restraining order if we need it. We file before he knows you're back. Ari stared at her own hands on the desk. They looked steady. How fast? If the evidence is what you've implied, we can request an emergency hearing Monday morning, Nia said. But Ari, if we start this, we don't go halfway. I don't do halfway, Ari replied. Nia didn't ask, "Are you okay?" She asked the question that mattered. Do you have clean documentation? Originals, not just screenshots. I have more than that, Ari said. I have the logs, metadata, timestamps. The mirror is pulling everything in real time. Another pause. Good, Nia said, and there was something like approval in her tone. Send me an encrypted package tonight. Don't email anything. Use the secure link I'm about to text you. And Ari, do not go home. Not yet. I'm not, Ari said. She hung up and immediately opened a second contact. Keisha Vaughn, BlueLedger's CFO, answered with the sleepy irritation of someone dragged out of bed. Then she heard Ari's voice, and the irritation vanished. Ari, what's wrong? Ari kept her own voice even. I need you to do something for me, quietly, tonight. Keisha sat up on the other end of the line. Ari could hear it in the shift of breath. Okay. I need you to pull a complete list of vendor accounts opened in the last 24 months, including bank routing, tax IDs, and approval chains, Ari said. Then I need you to run a match against employee records for any names that received payroll deposits, but never had an HR file. Keisha went silent for a beat. That's specific. I'll explain later, Ari said. For now, tell me you can do it without tipping anyone. Keisha's voice hardened. Ari, I can do anything without tipping anyone. That's my job. Ari felt a small gratitude, sharp and clean. Good, I need it by sunrise. Keisha didn't ask for details. She asked a different question. Is Marquis involved? Ari let one breath out. Yes. Keisha's reply was soft but not gentle. I'm sorry, and I'm on it. When Ari ended the call, the room felt quieter, as if every sound had been dampened for the sake of listening. She made one more call, this one to a woman named Layla Grant. Layla was Ari's oldest friend from graduate school, now working in a federal office that didn't put its name on business cards. They had both started with code and ended up in rooms where code became policy. Layla answered with a familiar warning. If this is about politics, I don't want it. It's not, Ari said. If it's about a man, I really don't want it. Ari almost smiled. Almost. It's about money, fraud, and a corporate leak. That got Layla's attention. Talk. Ari gave her the outline, the way you brief someone who might have to stand in front of a judge and not blink. Layla's voice changed as Ari spoke. It sharpened, it slowed. When Ari finished, Layla exhaled. This is federal jurisdiction, if the transfers cross state lines. And if there's an offshore component, there is, Ari said. And if Jada Monroe is funneling information to a competitor, that's not just an affair, Layla said. That's a conspiracy. Ari watched the city lights flicker across the water. I want it treated like one. You're sure you want the criminal road? Layla asked. Once that machine moves, it doesn't stop for your feelings. My feelings aren't driving, Ari said. My evidence is. Send me what you can through secure channels, Layla said. I can point you to the right contact, but Ari, be prepared. People will hear your name. They'll say you're doing this out of spite. They'll call you cold. Ari's voice stayed level. I can live with their opinions. I can't live with him stealing my company. Layla paused, then said something Ari would remember later. The most dangerous person in a courtroom isn't the loud one. It's the one who never raises their voice. Ari ended the call and finally flipped her phone face down again. Then she worked. She assembled an evidence packet the way she built systems. No wasted motion, no guesswork, no loose ends. She labeled files with dates and descriptions. She exported logs with digital signatures. She pulled email headers so no one could pretend messages were fabricated. She cross-referenced bank transfers with vendor onboarding records. She turned chaos into something that could be proven. At 2:13 a.m., she found the first thing that made her stop. A vendor account named Capital Compliance Group had been paid in steady increments for 6 months. The services were always described the same way: regulatory consulting. Marquis loved words that sounded harmless: regulatory, consulting, compliance. They were the kind of words that soothe people into not asking questions. Ari clicked into the vendor profile. No tax ID. A mailbox address in Virginia. A bank account that routed through an intermediary and then landed, after a chain of transfers, in an account linked to Jada Monroe. Ari's stomach didn't drop. It hardened. She opened another vendor. Riverstone Solutions. Same pattern. Payment, transfer, Jada. Ari's fingers moved faster now, the way they did when she was debugging something dangerous. Her mind narrowed. Somewhere in the dark, Marquis was sleeping in her bed, believing his plan was smooth. Believing she'd walk into the office on Monday with tears in her eyes and papers in her hand like a surrender flag. Ari didn't even feel anger. Anger was loud and sloppy. Ari felt clarity. She pulled up the calendar from the holiday party where she'd seen Jada. She remembered Jada's laugh. Light, careless, not unlike the laugh Ari heard behind the living room door. Ari remembered Marquis introducing Jada as someone from the industry. Jada had looked Ari up and down with polite interest, the way someone examines a lock they might someday pick. Ari clicked open a thread of internal messages Marquis thought were invisible. BlueLedger's messaging system sat on top of their own secure architecture. Marquis believed he was protected by the walls Ari built. He didn't understand that the builder always knows where the quiet corners are. The messages were short and careful, but they weren't clean. Jada. Need the roadmap for Q3. Marquis. You'll get it after the wire hits. Jada. Don't play games. Marquis. I'm not. I'm being safe. Ari's jaw tightened. She scrolled. Marquis. She's traveling next week. Vegas. Perfect cover. Jada. Serve her papers at work like we said. Public pressure works. Marquis. She'll sign. She hates being watched. Ari stared at the words until they felt like etched lines. The casual cruelty. The certainty. She saved the thread, exported it with headers, and added it to the packet. At 3:40 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Where are you? Your car is not here, Marquis. He was already checking, already calculating. Ari didn't respond. She deleted the message and turned the phone off entirely. She would not let his curiosity pull her out of her own mind. When she turned back to her laptop, the mirror was still recording. Little blips of activity pinged in. Marquis logging in from home, likely scrolling through dashboards with the calm arrogance of a man who believed he owned them. Ari watched the timestamp. Marquis' login lasted 12 minutes. Then another login. Jada, from an external device. Ari's eyes narrowed. Jada was in her house, or at least near it. Touching the network Ari built, moving through Ari's life like she belonged there. Ari saved the access logs. She added them to the packet. At 3:58 a.m., the soft chime of the elevator sounded somewhere down the hall. Ari's fingers paused over the keyboard. Hotel sounds were usually dull, ice machines, distant voices, a door closing too hard. But that elevator chime hit her like a memory. Marquis loved surprise. For one sharp second, Ari pictured him stepping off the elevator with that charming smile, a bouquet in one hand, a lie in the other. She clicked the deadbolt into place and moved to the peephole. A man in a dark jacket walked past carrying a small paper bag. 2 doors down, a door opened, a woman said thank you, and the man handed over the bag. Room service. Ordinary. Ari let her breath out slowly. She wasn't afraid of Marquis showing up. She was aware of what it would cost if he did. Awareness was different than fear. She returned to the desk and forced herself to slow down. In the years she'd built BlueLedger, she'd learned that speed without discipline was how people made mistakes that couldn't be undone. Marquis was fast and sloppy. Ari was patient and precise. That difference was about to decide everything. She opened a new document and wrote a timeline in plain language, the kind a judge could follow without needing a technical translator. Month 1, suspicious routing. Month 3, vendor added without tax ID. Month 6, duplicate invoices. Month 12, payroll anomalies. Month 18, forged loan documents. As she typed, old scenes replayed, Marquis teasing that she was married to her laptop. Marquis kissing her hair while she stared at code. Marquis telling friends, "Ari's the genius, I just keep her grounded." Grounded. What a sweet word for a leash. When the first gray light touched the curtains, Ari made herself stop. She copied the packet onto 2 encrypted drives and slipped one into the lining of her suitcase. The other went into the hotel safe. If her laptop disappeared, the case would still exist. She turned her phone back on long enough to watch messages stack like bricks. "Where are you? Call me. Answer me, Ari, don't do this." That last one almost made her smile. Don't do this, like you were the injured party, like theft had been a misunderstanding and her silence was the cruelty. Ari took screenshots and saved them. Even his panic had value. Panic proved knowledge. Panic proved fear. On Sunday afternoon, after she drove past the house, she met Keisha in a quiet coffee shop near Union Market, where no one from BlueLedger ever went. Ari sat in a corner booth with her laptop angled away from the room, watching the door without looking like she was watching the door. Keisha slid in, coat still on, eyes scanning the space. "Tell me," she said. Ari showed her the vendor chains, the payroll ghosts, and the forged signatures. Keisha's face tightened with each page. "He did this while we were cutting budgets," Keisha murmured, "while people were skipping raises." Ari's voice stayed even. "That's why Monday can't look like chaos. People need to feel protected." Keisha nodded once hard. "They will. But Ari, are you ready for what comes after? The headlines? The investors?" Ari looked down at her coffee, black and untouched. "I'm ready for the truth. I'm not ready to keep pretending." Keisha's gaze softened for a brief second. "You shouldn't have to." Ari met her eyes. "I won't." When Keisha left, Ari stayed seated for a moment, watching her walk out with her shoulders squared. Marquis had built his plan on the idea that Ari stood alone. He had underestimated the quiet loyalty of people who'd watched her do the work. By the time Ari returned to the hotel, the evidence packet felt like more than a weapon. It felt like a shield. Before she stepped back onto the street, Ari stopped at the small shop inside the hotel lobby and bought a prepaid phone with cash. It wasn't paranoia, it was practice. Marquis knew her usual number, her patterns, her favorite leverage points. She needed one line he couldn't touch. She saved it under a simple name, Spare, and texted the number to Nia and Layla only. Then she powered it down and tucked it deep in her bag, the way you hide a key, when you know someone has been trying every door. Outside, the air smelled of rain and exhaust. Ari lifted her face into it and let the cold steady her. In a city built on paper, she reminded herself, the person who controls the documents controls the outcome. Her grandmother used to say, "Keep your receipts and keep your mouth shut." Tonight, Ari understood why those two rules belonged together in the first place. There was a moment where Ari understood the worst part wasn't the affair. It was the entitlement, the way they treated her work, her home, her future like property already won. Late Sunday, after the coffee shop meeting and one last pass through her evidence, Ari drove to BlueLedger's headquarters. The building sat near downtown, glass and steel, the kind of structure that looked modern and expensive without being flashy. The lobby was quiet on weekends. The security guard at the desk nodded when he saw Ari, surprised, but not alarmed. "Morning, Miss James." Ari smiled politely. "Morning. I forgot something." She took the elevator alone. On the executive floor, the hallway lights were dimmed. It smelled faintly like carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Ari's footsteps made no sound. She didn't go to the smaller development office everyone thought was hers. She went to the corner office that technically belonged to Obsidian Bridge Holdings. The office Marquis had never asked about. The office he walked past every day without curiosity because he assumed it belonged to a silent investor who would never show up. Ari opened the door with her key and stepped inside. The room was quiet, in the way secure rooms are quiet. Soundproofed, insulated, separated from the world. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out on the city. The desk was clean. The chairs were arranged neatly. A safe sat behind a framed photograph of the river. Ari sat down at the desk and opened a leather folder. Inside were copies of the corporate structure documents, ownership charts, resolutions, shareholder agreements, paper that could change everything with a signature. She had built BlueLedger like a fortress because she understood something Marquis never did. Charisma doesn't protect you when the law arrives. Paper does. Her phone buzzed. This time it was Keisha. "I have it," Keisha said, and Ari could hear the tension in her voice. "Vendor list, payroll anomalies. Ari, there are 12 employees getting paid who don't exist, and those vendor accounts, half of them lead to the same routing number." Ari closed her eyes for 1 second, just long enough to accept the full shape of the theft. "How much?" Keisha hesitated. "Directly? At least 2.7 million over 20 months. If we include loan draws and the credit card abuse, it's higher." "Loan draws?" Ari's eyes opened. "What loan draws?" Keisha's voice tightened. "There are 2 lines of credit opened against company receivables," Marquis signed. "Your signature appears on the documents." Ari went still. Her body didn't panic. It froze into focus. "Send me the documents." "I'm sending them now," Keisha said. "Ari, if those loans default..." "They won't," Ari said. Keisha breathed out sharp. "I'm with you. Just tell me what you need next." Ari watched the city beyond the window, the slow movement of cars like ants. "I need you quiet and close. Monday, you're going to be in a room with people who look like they're about to fall apart. I need you calm." Keisha's answer was immediate. "I was built for calm." Ari ended the call and opened the loan documents. There it was, her name, typed neatly on a signature line. A scanned signature that looked close enough to fool a bank clerk, but not close enough to fool Ari. Marquis had forged her. Under the signature was a clause granting the borrower authority to pledge intellectual property as collateral. Ari's mouth went dry, but her mind stayed sharp. Marquis hadn't just stolen cash. He had tried to mortgage the future. She forwarded the documents to Nia. Then she called Nia. Nia answered like she'd been waiting. "I received your package. It's extensive." "That's a polite way to say devastating," Ari said. Nia didn't deny it. "The loan documents are worse. Bank fraud, forgery. If we file emergency relief, we can freeze accounts and stop further transfers." "I want everything frozen," Ari said. "Personal and corporate." Nia's voice turned firm. "Ari, we can request it. Judges don't love drastic orders without clean cause, but..." "I have clean cause," Ari said. "And I have a witness." "Who?" Ari paused. "Me." Nia's silence held for a beat. "All right, Monday morning. Meet me at my office at 6:30. We file at 8. And Ari, don't do anything that gives him warning." "I won't," Ari said. Nia's voice lowered. "One more thing. He told you signed away your stake." "Yes," Nia exhaled. "Do you remember the documents you signed the week before the wedding? The ones Marquis said were just license paperwork because you were too busy to read them?" Ari's chest tightened. She saw the kitchen table, the pen in her hand, Marquis' voice like warm syrup. "Yes." Nia's voice went colder. "Those weren't license forms. Marquis brought you a prenuptial agreement packet and misrepresented what it was. Fraud in the inducement." "A prenup," Ari whispered. "A very detailed one," Nia said. "It protects premarital property and business assets. It includes a fraud clause. If either party commits fraud against the other, they forfeit all claims to marital property and any equity obtained through deception." Marquis had tried to trap her with paper, and instead he had signed his own cage. Nia continued, "That clause turns this from messy divorce into clean forfeiture." Ari's voice came out low. "So he planned this from the beginning." "It appears so," Nia said. "But he didn't plan for you. For your structure. For Obsidian Bridge." Ari's eyes flicked to the folder on her desk, the ownership chart sitting like a blade. "He thinks Obsidian Bridge is a quiet investor." "And you are," Nia said. Ari allowed herself one small, humorless breath. He's about to learn what quiet means. After she hung up with Nia, Ari stayed in the Obsidian Bridge office and simply sat there for a minute, hands folded, eyes on the skyline. From that height, the city looked neat, lines of traffic, blocks of light, the river like a dark ribbon. It was easy to forget that inside those clean lines were people with sharp intentions. She opened the safe behind the photograph and pulled out an envelope she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a copy of her grandmother's will and a handwritten note in script. Don't confuse peace with safety. Peace is quiet. Safety is prepared. Ari stared at the note until the words stopped being sentimental and started being instruction. Before she left the building, she walked through BlueLedger's halls one more time. Every door, every silent conference room, every frame press photo of Marquis shaking hands with clients. Ari took it all in like a forensic scene. She could almost hear the way he would try to spin this tomorrow. Misunderstanding, overreaction, Ari being emotional. He would try to make her look unstable so he could look reasonable. That was why she would not raise her voice, not once. On her way out, she stopped by the IT closet and checked the access panel herself. Marquis had been slipping extra admin privileges into the system like coins into a pocket. Ari reversed them in minutes, leaving him the illusion of control, while quietly closing the doors he'd been using. She didn't lock him out yet. Not until the court order landed. For now, she wanted him comfortable. Outside, the afternoon had turned colder. Ari drove to the storage unit she'd rented under her maiden name, the same unit she'd been filling slowly for weeks without admitting to herself why. The fluorescent lights inside made everything look pale. Boxes sat stacked neatly against the back wall. Photo albums, her grandmother's jewelry, hard drives, a small lockbox with passports and birth certificates, the few items that couldn't be replaced by insurance or money. She ran her hand along the top box and felt a brief ache in her throat. Not for Marquis. For the version of herself who had believed building a life together meant sharing everything. She swallowed the ache down and clicked the lockbox closed. Feelings could come later. Today was for decisions. Back in the car, her burner phone buzzed once. Layla. I reviewed what you sent, Layla said. It's strong. If you want federal attention, I can connect you to a white-collar unit. But Ari, this will get messy before it gets clean. Ari watched a man jog past the storage facility entrance, headphones in, completely unaware. I can handle messy, she said. I won't handle stolen. Good, Layla replied. When the agents contact you, say less than you want to say. Let the documents talk. And don't try to educate them. They hate feeling educated. Ari almost smiled. Noted. After she ended the call, Ari drove back toward the hotel. She passed her neighborhood without looking up at the house. She didn't need to see it again to remember what it was now. Evidence. In the elevator up to her floor, a couple stood beside her holding hands. The woman leaned into the man's shoulder, safe in affection. Ari kept her face neutral and stared at the numbers above the doors, thinking only of timing. Exactly Monday, 10:30, Marquis' office, the moment when the story would stop being private. That night, Marquis texted again from another number. Call me, we need to talk. Ari didn't respond. She let him spiral in her silence. Monday came like a blade. Ari woke at 4:30, dressed in a charcoal suit, and pinned her hair back neatly. She didn't wear jewelry except a thin watch, no softness, no distraction. She looked like a woman walking into a boardroom, not a woman walking into a divorce. At 6:25, she pulled into Nia Caldwell's office building. Nia was already there, coffee untouched, eyes sharp. She spread documents across the conference table like a dealer laying down cards. Emergency motion for asset freeze, Nia said, tapping the first stack. Temporary restraining order, corporate resolutions removing Marquis from any executive role, a notice to the banks, a criminal referral package for federal authorities. Ari moved through the papers with steady hands. And the marriage fraud contract trap? Nia slid a separate document toward her. The prenup packet. The fraud clause is highlighted. If Marquis claims he didn't understand what he signed, we show the judge he was the one who presented it as something else. Ari's eyes skimmed the text. The language was clinical, almost kind. It didn't mention love. It mentioned property, equity, deceit. It described her reality better than any vow ever had. At 8 sharp, Nia filed the emergency motions. Ari sat in the waiting area, watching the second hand on her watch sweep forward. At 9:10, Nia's phone buzzed. She listened, then looked at Ari. Judge signed it. Ari felt no fireworks, just a clean click in her mind, like a lock turning. By 10, the banks had begun freezing accounts. Notifications rolled in like quiet thunder. A personal account flagged, a corporate account locked, credit line suspended, access revoked. Ari's phone buzzed once, then again. Marquis calling, Marquis texting. Marquis realizing the world had shifted under his feet. Ari didn't answer. At 10:30, she walked into BlueLedger's lobby. The guard looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. James." Ari nodded. "Good morning." She rode the elevator up, alone. Her reflection in the polished metal doors looked calm, almost bored. On the executive floor, Marquis' assistant, a young woman named Tiana, looked up from her desk and blinked in surprise. "Ms. James, Mr. James said you were out of town." "I was," Ari said. "I'm back." Tiana stood, uncertainty flickering across her face. "He's in a meeting." Ari's voice stayed gentle. "I need to speak with him now." Tiana hesitated. Should I tell him?" "No," Ari said softly. "I'll do it." Ari walked past the desk and stopped in front of Marquis' office. The door was half open. She could hear his voice inside, bright and confident, the voice of a man selling certainty. Ari pushed the door open fully. Marquis stood by the window with his phone at his ear, laughing. He turned when he saw her, and for half a second, his face went blank, like someone caught without a mask. "Ari," he said too loud. "I'll call you back." Marcus snapped into the phone, then ended the call quickly. His smile returned, forced into place. "Baby, you're back. Where have you been?" Ari stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course. Sit down. Let's. Ari remained standing. "I know about Jada." Marquis' eyes flickered, then steadied. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the money," Ari continued, her voice flat. "The vendor accounts, the routing numbers, the transfers, the loans you opened with my forged signature." Marquis' smile vanished. His jaw tightened. "You're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking very clearly," Ari said. Marquis took a breath, then tried a different tone. Soft, disappointed, almost paternal. "Ari, you're brilliant, but you don't understand how these deals work. Sometimes money moves. Sometimes we restructure." "Don't," Ari said quietly. The word was small, but it stopped him, like a hand on his chest. Ari reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She tapped one contact and put it on speaker. "Nia," she said. "We're ready." Nia's voice filled the office, calm as cold water. "Marquis Jameson," she said. "You are being served with notice of immediate termination from BlueLedger systems, effective immediately. You are also being served with an emergency court order freezing all personal and business accounts associated with you pending investigation of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Federal authorities have been notified. You are instructed to surrender company devices and keys to security." Marquis stared at Ari like he couldn't process language. Then his face flushed red. "You can't do this," he snapped. "I'm the COO. I own equity. You don't have the authority to—" Ari's voice stayed level. "Actually, you don't own what you think you own." Marquis' eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "You thought Obsidian Bridge Holdings was a silent investor," Ari said. Marquis' throat bobbed as he swallowed. "It is." Ari stepped closer, her gaze steady, her tone almost gentle. "Obsidian Bridge Holdings is me. It always has been." The room went silent, so quiet Ari could hear Marquis' breath catch in his chest. The silence after Ari's confession didn't feel dramatic. It felt final, like a vault door sealing. Marquis stared at her, as if he'd misheard. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's not possible," he said, voice suddenly thin. "Obsidian Bridge is an investor. I've met their representative." "You've met my attorney," Ari replied. "You never met the owner." His eyes flicked to the speakerphone, then back to her. "This is a stunt," he hissed. "You're trying to scare me. You can't freeze accounts because you're emotional." Ari's tone stayed level. "The court can." Marquis lunged for his laptop like he could outrun reality with a password. He typed. The login rejected him. He tried the banking app. A legal hold notice flashed. His face changed color in real time. Red with outrage, then pale with fear. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I stopped you," Ari said. The office door opened without a knock. 2 security guards stepped in, quiet and steady. Marquis snapped around. "Get out. This is my office." One guard held out a hand. "Mr. James, we have instructions from counsel. You need to leave the floor." Marquis laughed, sharp and brittle. "Counsel? That's my wife. She doesn't control—" "I control BlueLedger. Ari cut in, soft and clean. He tried to step toward her, the old habit of filling space, but the guard shifted into his path. For a moment, Ari saw the truth in his eyes. Not heartbreak, not remorse, just panic at losing the story where he was the center. Then, panic hardened into performance. Marquis raised his voice for the hallway. Fine. Let's see what your employees think when they realize you're blowing up the company out of spite. This isn't spite, Ari said. It's cleanup. They escorted him out. Marquis fought to make it theatrical, calling her name like she owed him comfort. Doors cracked open, faces appeared. Tiana, his assistant, stood frozen at her desk, a hand pressed to her mouth. Ari didn't chase him. She walked back to the desk, pressed the intercom, and spoke with the calm of someone reading a weather report. All staff, she said, please gather in conference room A in 15 minutes for an important announcement. Then she sat down in Marquis' chair, not as a victory, but as a reset. In the quiet that followed, Ari felt her heartbeat in her throat, fast but controlled. She opened her laptop and pulled up the memo she'd drafted, an executive notice from Obsidian Bridge Holdings, authorizing immediate leadership changes and full cooperation with investigators. No emotion, just authority. Conference room. A filled quickly. People came in clusters, whispering. Some looked scared, some looked angry. A few looked like they'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop and were exhausted by the suspense. Keisha Vaughn stood near the front, posture solid. When she caught Ari's eye, she gave a small nod. Here, steady, with you. Ari waited until the last chair scraped into place. She didn't demand silence. She let it arrive. Good morning, she began. I'm Ariel James. Most of you know me as the person who built our core platform. Some of you know me as the person who avoids the spotlight. A murmur moved through the room. Today I need to step forward, Ari continued, because something happened that affects all of us. Marquis James is no longer employed by BlueLedger Systems. He was terminated for cause this morning. The room reacted like a body hit with cold water, gasps, sharp inhales, whispered questions. Ari lifted one hand slightly. I know this is shocking, she said. I'm going to explain what I can, and I'm going to tell you what happens next. She clicked the remote. A slide appeared. Leadership update and security notice. Over the last 20 months, Ari said, there has been sustained financial misconduct inside the company. Embezzlement, fraudulent vendor payments, unauthorized transfers, and forged loan documents. Keisha spoke once, voice steady. We have documentation. Ari nodded. We have extensive documentation, she said. This morning, an emergency court order froze accounts connected to the misconduct. Federal authorities have been notified, and an investigation is underway. Federal? Someone whispered, like the word itself was dangerous. Yes, Ari said, because of interstate transfers and offshore routing. She held the room with her gaze. Now listen carefully. Your jobs are safe. Payroll will run. Client deliverables remain on track. Our product is strong. This is a governance problem, not a collapse. A young engineer blurted, How can you be sure? Because Marquis did not control all resources, Ari answered, and because I've been preparing for this. Another click. The ownership diagram appeared. Obsidian Bridge Holdings, Ariel James, and the employee pool. Ari didn't pause for drama. Obsidian Bridge Holdings is not an outside investor, she said. It is a holding entity I created when I founded BlueLedger. I control it. Silence landed hard. People stared like she'd spoken a foreign language. Keisha added quietly, It's true. Ari continued before shock could become chaos. I structured ownership that way to protect the company, she said. That structure allows us to act quickly today. An older developer asked, voice careful, So you're the majority owner? Yes, Ari replied, and as of this morning, I am acting CEO. The words didn't feel triumphant, they felt heavy. The room measured her the way people always measure new leadership. Ari expected it. Someone in the back asked, How long have you known? I suspected something was wrong 18 months ago, Ari said. I began documenting anomalies. I did not confront Marquis because I needed a complete record, one that would stand up in court and prevent evidence destruction. A different voice, sharper. So you let him steal. Ari didn't flinch. I let him reveal the full scope, she said. If I confronted him early, he would have tightened his methods and moved faster. He was counting on my emotions. I chose patience. Keisha stepped forward with numbers, because numbers keep people from drowning in rumor. Current estimates show approximately 2.7 million in direct losses, she said. We also uncovered 2 fraudulent lines of credit totaling 4.8 million. We are challenging them, but we're treating them as liabilities until resolved. The room exhaled in a wave. A few people looked sick. Ari felt the tremor of their fear and anchored it with certainty. I have authorized an emergency capital infusion, Ari said. $10 million effective today from Obsidian Bridge Holdings. We will cover obligations, protect payroll, and stabilize operations. A woman from customer success whispered, 10 million? Ari didn't soften her voice. We are not punishing employees for one executive's crimes, she said. She clicked to a final slide. Next steps. Here's what happens, Ari said. All company devices will undergo forensic review. You may be interviewed. If you are, tell the truth. Do not guess. Do not embellish. Client communication will go through a central team so we remain consistent. And we keep working. We keep building. We do not let one person's misconduct define us. A hand rose from sales. What about Jada Monroe? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ari kept her face unreadable. Jada Monroe works for TechForge, she said, naming their competitor. We have evidence suggesting a corporate information leak connected to her relationship with Marquis. That will be addressed through appropriate channels. That was all. People didn't need details. They needed a plan. Ari looked across the room, letting the weight of responsibility settle in a way that didn't crush. I know this is not what you came to work to hear, she said, but I'm asking you to trust the evidence and the process. BlueLedger is bigger than one personality. If you stay steady, we will come out of this stronger. One by one, heads nodded, not because they were comfortable, but because her certainty gave them something to hold. When the meeting ended, the building stayed tense, like a house after a storm. Ari returned to the Obsidian Bridge office with Keisha. They spread documents across the desk. Vendor chains, approvals, routing numbers, the forged signatures. Keisha's jaw tightened as she scanned a loan clause. He pledged IP as collateral, she said quietly. If those banks fight us, we fight back, Ari replied, with facts. They spent hours notifying institutions, sending fraud notices, recording every response. Ari moved through it like a surgeon. Clean cuts, no wasted motion. Every now and then, a memory tried to rise. Marquis' hand on her back at a gala, his voice calling her my genius. Ari treated those memories like corrupted data, marked, acknowledged, quarantined. Late afternoon, 2 federal agents arrived in plain clothes. Special Agent Ramirez introduced himself with a brief nod. Ms. James, we reviewed counsel's referral, Ramirez said. We need originals, and we'll need a formal interview. You'll have them, Ari said. She walked them through the structure, the mirror logs, the vendor payments, and the forged loan documents. Ramirez asked precise questions, the kind that made a case stand upright. Did Mr. James have authority to approve vendors, he asked. Yes, Ari said, as COO. And he exceeded that authority? I don't believe, Ari answered. I can show you. Ramirez's eyes flickered with something like respect. He was used to victims who spoke in feelings. Ari spoke in proof. When Ari mentioned TechForge and Jada Monroe, Ramirez's expression tightened. Corporate leaks are hard to prove without clean intent. Then we start with what's clean, Ari said. Fraud, forgery, theft. Ramirez nodded. That's the right order. Before they left, Ramirez asked about travel. Ari said, Vegas next week. Ramirez's pen paused. We'll ensure he doesn't leave, he said. After the agents were gone, Ari's phone lit up with unknown numbers and frantic texts. Marquis scrambling for a way around the silence. You're ruining everything. Call me right now. We can work this out. You lied too. The last message held the kind of audacity only a man in freefall could manage. Marquis had forged her signature, stolen from her company, planned her humiliation, and now he wanted to claim injury. Ari typed one reply. See you in court. Then she blocked the number and set the phone down, as if it were nothing more than a dead tool. Across the city, Marcus was learning what frozen meant in real life. His cards declined. His accounts displayed legal holds. His usual charm met polite distance, then closed doors. He drove to Jada's apartment in a borrowed car and pounded on the door like noise could restore control. Jada opened it in a robe, hair pinned up, face already annoyed. Marquis pushed inside, breathing hard. Ari froze everything, he said. She called the FBI. Jada went still. The FBI? She's claiming she owns Obsidian Bridge. Marcus spat. She's saying I own nothing. Jada's eyes narrowed. Tell me you didn't put details in writing. Marcus hesitated one beat too long. Jada's voice dropped. You're a liability. We're in this together, Marcus snapped. We were in an arrangement, Jada corrected. Arrangements end when they become evidence. He stepped closer. You can't abandon me. Jada walked to the door and opened it wide. Leave, she said, and don't contact me again. If anyone asks, I'll say you deceived me, that I thought the money was yours. Marcus' face twisted. You knew. Jada shrugged. Knowing isn't the same as provable, she said. That's what you never understood. She closed the door in his face. Ari didn't hear that scene in real time, but she understood it without being told. People like Marquis collect allies the way they collect applause. They assume loyalty is free. They learn the price when the bill arrives. That evening, back in the Obsidian Bridge office, Ari stood by the window and watched the city lights come on. The river looked like dark metal. The building around her hummed with late-night work, teams stabilizing systems, legal drafting notices, customer success rewriting scripts. Keisha came in softly. Payroll is stable, she said. Client messaging is consistent. The banks acknowledge the fraud notices. Ari nodded. Good. Keisha hesitated. People will ask why you stayed in the background so long, she said. Ari kept her gaze on the skyline. Because I was building something that didn't need a spotlight, she replied. And because I needed to know who Marquis would become when he thought no one was watching. Keisha's voice was quiet. And now you know. Ari turned from the window. Her face was calm, but her eyes held the clean certainty of a door that has finally been locked. Now, she said, everyone will. Outside her door, the executive floor was quiet. Even the air vents sounded cautious. Ari gathered the evidence drives into her bag, clicked the safe shut, and felt the relief of having chosen a direction. Tomorrow would bring headlines, board calls, and questions sharpened like knives. Tonight, she allowed herself one breath of silence before the storm. Ari expected the morning after to feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like standing in a clean room after a fire. Air filtered, floors scrubbed, everything quiet enough that you could hear the damage settling inside the walls. Tuesday began with sunlight and phone calls. Not the frantic kind. The official kind. Bank compliance officers, outside counsel, a venture partner who spoke in careful phrases and wanted a clear statement. In D.C., rumors moved faster than subpoenas. Ari sat in the Obsidian Bridge office with a mug of black coffee she never drank and listened to attorney Nia Caldwell read the schedule like a prayer. Temporary restraining order is in place, Nia said. The asset freeze is active. The banks acknowledge the fraud notices. Agent Ramirez will take custody of devices today, and the court granted you exclusive use of the marital home pending further hearing. Ari didn't react to the word home. Home was not a building. Home was safety. Marquis had burned that definition down. Keisha Vaughn knocked once and stepped in, carrying a thin folder. We're stable, she said. Payroll ran, clients didn't bolt. Two asked if Marquis is still involved. I told them the truth. He isn't. Ari nodded. Good, Keisha lowered her voice. He's calling people, trying to tell his story. Let him, Ari said. Stories don't beat documents. By noon, Special Agent Ramirez arrived with 2 tech specialists. They moved through BlueLedger like surgeons, cases labeled, question short. Ramirez sat across from Ari in a conference room and slid a recorder onto the table. For the record, he said, state your name and role. Ariel James, Ari replied. Founder, majority owner, acting CEO. Ramirez nodded once. When did you first suspect misconduct? 18 months ago, Ari said. A payment routed to an account I didn't recognize. And you began collecting evidence. Yes. Ramirez leaned back. Most people confront. They explode. They give the suspect warning. You didn't. I needed the full scope, Ari said. and I needed to keep employees protected. When Ari mentioned Jada Monroe and TechForge, Ramirez's expression tightened. Corporate leaks are hard to prove without clean intent. Then start with what's clean, Ari said. Forgery, fraud, theft. Ramirez's pen paused, then moved again. That's what we'll do. That afternoon, Marquis learned what exclusive use meant. He showed up at the house with borrowed keys and in an entitled posture, expecting the door to open because it always had. It didn't. A new lock blinked blue, indifferent. He pounded. He shouted about our property, loud enough for the neighbors to peek through blinds. Ari watched him on the security feed from her office monitor. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt something colder. Confirmation. He wasn't sorry. He was inconvenienced. Texts arrived from burner numbers, each one more desperate than the last. You can't do this to me. Talk to me like an adult. You're making me look like a criminal. Ari forwarded the messages to Nia and blocked each number. Then she turned the feed off and returned to work. 2 days later, BlueLedger's board met in a private suite downtown. Investors sat with folders open, faces arranged into neutral concern. Ari stood at the head of the table and spoke without apology. Obsidian Bridge Holdings is my holding entity, she said. I've controlled the majority share since day one. Marquis held operational authority and a minority stake that is now subject to forfeiture due to fraud. One investor asked, "Why hide that?" "Protection," Ari replied. "Paperwork is the only language predators respect." Keisha laid out the numbers, direct losses, fraudulent credit lines, and the plan to stabilize. Ari confirmed an emergency infusion from Obsidian Bridge to protect payroll and obligations. By the end, the vote was unanimous. Ari's leadership ratified, Marquis' access revoked, cooperation with federal authorities approved. Afterward, an investor said, "Most people would have crumbled." Ari answered quietly, "Most people waste time hoping the person who hurt them will suddenly become decent." The criminal case moved with the slow, heavy rhythm of government. Grand jury, indictment, hearings. Each step felt like a door closing, not slammed, but locked. Marquis hired a defense attorney who tried to turn fraud into miscommunication. He suggested Ari was vindictive. Nia filed motions that made those claims irrelevant. At the first major hearing, the prosecutor played an internal message Marquis thought was invisible. She'll sign anything to avoid a scene. Then they displayed the loan documents with Ari's forged signature. Marquis stared at the screen as if the letters might rearrange themselves into innocence. They didn't. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with microphones like spears. Ari gave them nothing warm to hold. "This is an ongoing legal matter," she said. "BlueLedger is operating normally. Our employees are protected. That's all." Weeks passed. BlueLedger steadied. Clients renewed. The internal culture shifted. Less performance, more proof. Ari held town halls and answered questions plainly. An older engineer asked once, "How do you stay so calm?" Ari paused. "I'm not calm," she said. "I'm disciplined. There's a difference." Late at night, messages from strangers started arriving. Women and men describing financial control, paperwork traps, silent theft inside marriages. Ari read them like warnings, written in someone else's handwriting. So she created something small and sharp. The Obsidian Bridge Legal Fund. No gala, no headline. Just money set aside for emergency consults and filings for people who couldn't afford them. Nia helped structure it. Keisha built the reporting controls so it stayed clean. When Marcus' trial began, he wore a suit that hung looser than it used to. His eyes flicked toward Ari, searching for an emotion he could use. He didn't find one. The prosecution laid out the case like a blueprint. Fake vendors, routing chains, payroll ghosts, forgery, wire transfers. Jada's name surfaced often, but the law punished what it could prove, and Marquis was what it could prove. Ari testified for hours. When the defense tried to paint her as controlling, she didn't flinch. "Yes," Ari said, "I control my company. That's what ownership means." When he suggested she set Marquis up, Ari looked at the jury. "I gave him access," she said. "He chose to steal. That isn't a setup. That's a decision." The jury deliberated less than a day. Guilty. Sentencing came 8 weeks later. The judge spoke slowly, like someone tired of hearing greed dressed up as confusion. "Mr. James," he said, "you abused trust, manipulated documents, and attempted to profit from deception. You will serve 14 years in federal prison. Restitution will be ordered, assets seized. You are barred from serving as an officer or director of any corporation under federal jurisdiction." Marquis looked back once at Ari as the marshals led him away. There was no apology there, only the shock of consequence. Outside, cameras waited again. Ari stood on the courthouse steps with Nia at her left and Keisha behind her like a wall. A reporter asked, "Do you feel like you got revenge?" Ari's answer was quiet. "I didn't win by being cruel," she said. "I won by being prepared." In the days that followed, the world tried to pull Ari back into spectacle. Tech blogs wanted interviews. A podcast host asked for the juicy part. Investors offered reassurance wrapped in compliments. Even strangers recognized her face and looked for cracks. Ari gave none. She kept her voice low and her boundaries high, the way survivors do. BlueLedger issued one plain memo. Leadership confirmed, systems audited, clients protected. No dramatic language, just facts. Behind the scenes, the work was relentless. The banks fought the fraud claims at first until Nia forced them to read their own documents and see the forged signature they'd accepted. 2 lenders backed down. One tried to cling to the IP collateral anyway. Ari's team produced mirror logs, routing chains, and vendor trails, and the lender's posture changed overnight. TechForge was next. Agent Ramirez couldn't charge what he couldn't prove, but civil court had a different appetite. Nia filed for an injunction to stop any use of BlueLedger's proprietary methods. TechForge denied everything. Then Jada Monroe was subpoenaed, and her lawyer's confidence started to wobble. Ari didn't sit in the deposition room, but she read the transcript afterward. Jada's answers were polished, full of "I don't recall." Every time she tried to sound innocent, a transfer appeared, a message thread surfaced, a calendar invite lined up with a leak. Jada's silence wasn't strength, it was fear. Inside BlueLedger, the office lost a certain kind of noise. Less flattery, fewer meetings staged for approval. Ari promoted engineers who'd been overlooked because they weren't client-facing. She raised entry-level salaries. She tightened access controls. She made the company feel like a place built to last, not a stage. A week after sentencing, she took down the framed photos of Marquis from the hallway. Not in anger, in accuracy. Then she bought a smaller place across town. No grand staircase, no shared memories baked into the paint. Just clean rooms, new locks, and windows facing the river. She furnished it slowly, choosing each item with intention. At a cybersecurity conference that spring, Ari gave a keynote about integrity. How the smallest hidden transaction becomes a crack if no one audits it. Afterward, a man approached her with respectful distance. Dante Reed, an engineer from a partner firm. He didn't ask about Marquis. He asked about her architecture choices, and he listened like listening was a skill. When Ari said she wasn't looking for anything complicated, Dante nodded. "Then we'll keep it simple," he said. "Coffee, not promises." It wasn't romance that healed her. It was the steady experience of being treated like a full person again. That evening, Ari returned to the Obsidian Bridge office after everyone left. The city beyond the glass was alive with ordinary lives. Ari stood by the window and felt, for the first time in a long time, the absence of tension in her shoulders. Not happiness. Not yet. Freedom. She thought of the moment at the doorway, the laughter, the crystal, the casual cruelty. It had been a turning point, not an ending. Marquis had tried to erase her, and instead he had revealed her. Ari closed her laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and walked out into the hallway, her heels quiet on the carpet. Some people call that revenge. Ari called it receipts. And if you stayed with me to the end, thank you. If this story hit you in the chest, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tap like to help this video reach more people, and drop a comment with your honest take. What would you have done in Ari's place? And where are you listening from tonight? And when the end screen pops up, click one more video and keep the story going.